Hi guys, I'm driving right now, but I wanted to comment on this post I saw earlier, and basically when it comes to cancer, first, we can go ahead and say that no one medication, whether natural or conventional, has a 100% success rate. There's no one medication that can cure all cancers. Okay. When it comes to RSO, one of the main things that we have to realize is, well, first of all, when it comes to cancer, one of the main things that we have to realize is that just like the word chemo, it's a generic word for a whole variety of different things. So in the case of, for instance, chemo, it's a generic word that's talking about that's generalized or generically used for a whole array of different types of pharmaceutical medications or combinations of medications that are used in the treatment of cancers. Now, when it comes to cancer, it's a similar situation. You have a generic word that is used for a whole variety of different autoimmune conditions. So not all cancers are the same. Okay, you have some cancers that they mainly are cells that have mutated, and what fuels them is just basically the glucose. So they produce they use a process that is a fermentation process, which, instead of an oxygenation process that normal cells use, these cells will use a fermentation process that can allow them to turn glucose into energy, and so they can replicate and survive, which is basically what they're seeking. These are cells that have adapted to their environment, to a toxic environment, and are trying to survive. And they have just found that adaptation is what allows them to survive. The thing with it is that the mechanism that tells cells when to die, which is apoptosis, when they mutate, that mechanism tends to deactivate, so to speak. And when this happens, then we have a bunch of cells that don't know how to die. So apoptosis is a self-destruct mechanism, so to speak. So it tells cells, hey, you've completed your cycle of what your purpose was for being in this body. It's time for you to die. And that mechanism tells it to die, and it just dies. It's like a cellular suicide, so to speak. Or you're not functioning properly, you need to die, and so it dies. Simple. Well, in the case of these cancer cells, that mechanism is off, and because it's off, then it doesn't know how to die. So it just replicates and replicates and replicates until it starts becoming an invasive species, right? That's taken over the space that should be for healthy cells, healthy organs, etc. And therefore affecting the environment in general, which would be the body. Kind of like, say, if you brought an invasive, you live on an island, like here I live in Puerto Rico, and they brought here I forget the name of it in English, but it's kind of like a ferret. They brought it here mainly for to deal with rats in agriculture, so that they would eat the rats, eat the mice and whatnot. But it turned out that they're night hunters, and then the rats would be out during the day, and they were worthless, or the other way around. But the thing was that they weren't eating the rats, and now we had this other species that kept on growing, kept on multiplying, and then now it was eating the eggs of local birds, even endangered species and things like that. So it just made the problem worse. So that's basically the concept of what cancer does in the body. Is just this animal is just trying to survive. And that's the same thing with these cancer cells. They're just cells that, due to the environment, they're trying to survive, and so they adapted. And so they said, hey, I'm not getting enough oxygenation to be able to use an oxygenated process to convert glucose into energy. So let me do this. Let me use this fermentation process and convert glucose into energy. And so it does that. And what cannabis does, I always try to explain that it doesn't matter, like RSO, FICO, whatever you want to, what names you want to use. At the end of the day, it's the cannabinoids that are doing the work, and the method that you're using, or the type of extraction that you're using, you're just seeking to use one that has the best solubility, the best absorption. That's basically what it is. So these types of ethanol-based extractions tend to have a better absorption than others, like CO2 distillates and say rosin press concentrates, or those kind of things. So, but at the end of the day, what matters is the absorption of the THC and other cannabinoids, CBD, CBG, CBN, all the terpenes, the flavonoids, etc. Why is this what matters? Well, because none of it is actually doing anything against cancer itself. It's your own endocannabinoid receptors that are doing the entire job. So your endocannabinoid receptors, their job is to regulate your body at a cellular level. So it's kind of like saying in a corporation, right? You have this big corporation, and then all of a sudden it has this. They change president, right? The president retires. They have a new president, and the new president says, "Hey, why are we having all these? Why are we wasting all this money on managers? They're managing people. They're telling them, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed. I mean, these people, that's their job. If they don't know how to do it, then they're fired. So why are we paying people just to, oversee these other people, which are the ones that are actually doing the work? Fire all the managers. We don't need them." What ends up happening is, then, it's a mess, because you have these people are they call them their pal. Hey, clock in for me. I'm gonna go to my my child's field day or something, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm just gonna go fishing today, or whatever. Or maybe they're trying to work, and so really, really well, but they're producing a lot, but their quality it's at the expense of quality, so their quality is low. Or the other way around, maybe they're just very meticulous in trying to make sure that their production is as best as possible, but then they're trying to seek the highest quality possible, but then their production is way down. So all of these things, it's the manager's job to oversee. It's just, well, in our body, the endocannabinoid receptors are those managers. So what happens also when, say, okay, they changed the president and they got a new president, or they brought back the old president and he rehired a bunch of managers or brought in new managers, and so now all of a sudden these people were used to doing whatever they wanted, were used to the mess, were used to living in the mess that there was, but now they're being managed, and it makes them uncomfortable. It makes them upset. They get, these managers are going to get pushback. Administration is going to get pushback. That tends to happen with our bodies also, right? So we've gotten our bodies used to feeding it junk. We've gotten our bodies used to, not sleeping properly enough, not exercising, not feeding it the foods that provide the nutrients that it needs, and so little by little, all these cells have adapted to the environment that you have fed it, that you have provided it. And so when you have suddenly you start to provide your body with RSO or with FECO, with cannabinoid extract concentrate, it's going to provide the cannabinoids that these endocannabinoid receptors need to activate, right? To turn on. It's like, I would say, like, you remember those little horse rides at supermarkets that the kids would always want, you'd to put in 2 quarters or a quarter or whatever, and it would give them a little ride for about a minute or so, half a minute, whatever, and then all of a sudden it would stop and you would need to put in another one, so it would keep going again. Well, with your endocannabinoid receptors, it's kind of like that. Those tokens or those quarters are THC and CBN. And lately it's believed that CBG might possibly be one too, but they're basically the equivalent of the endocannabinoids, okay? Or the cannabinoids endogenous to your body, the ones that your body already makes, like anandamide. So they're very similar. So it's kind of like saying this token that is about the same size, weight and everything as a quarter. So it fits in that same, in that machine, even though it's not what the machine normally would be using, because usually in the case of your endocannabinoid receptors, it would be using the cannabinoids that your body would produce, which is what's called endocannabinoids, instead of what's in the plant, which are phytocannabinoids. So these phytocannabinoids like THC, CBN, CBG, etc., these tend to, and in the case of at least those 3, they tend to be very similar to that quarter that your receptor needs, or that key that your receptor needs to activate for a while, for usually like 30-45 minutes or so, and then it'll stop and it'll require another one, and your body tends to store it in your fatty tissue, and when it needs it, then it'll get it from there and deposit it in that little mechanical horse. That's basically how that works. So here's what I'm getting to. The thing is this: normally people produce enough everybody produces cancer cells. Everybody has this process of your cells adapting every once in a while and becoming cancerous. But what happens? Your endocannabinoid receptors you're producing enough anandamide or endocannabinoid to activate enough of these endocannabinoid receptors. And if you're activating enough of these endocannabinoid receptors, then they can do their job, which in this case, it would be they signal these cancer cells so that their apoptosis mechanisms are active, and they realize that they're not supposed to be alive and they can commit suicide. That's one of the things they do. Another thing that they do is that they suppress. CBD does this a lot. Tends to do this more than THC. That's why it's recommended to use in combination with THC. It's one of the reasons when it comes to brain cancers, because brain cancers, they tend to have angiogenesis, which is basically you have the tumor, and that tumor starts spreading out these like tentacle-like things, these extremities. These are basically vesicular extremities through which they're able to pull in nutrients and glucose for the cancer that's inside of these tumors. And so it kind of keeps it separate from the rest of the body and feeds it at the same time. Anyways, what it does, one of the things that it does is it suppresses the production of these vesicular extremities, or it suppresses angiogenesis. So that's another one of the things that it does. And the third thing is, in the case of people that decide to receive chemo or radiation, which yes, are toxic, but to each their own. I try not to push one thing or another on anyone. That's a very personal decision. It's their health, and they have to inform themselves and in order to make an informed decision, and of what benefits versus risks that they value the most. And so for those that do decide to get chemo or radiation, well, the studies have shown that when you combine THC and when you provide or patients that are receiving chemo or radiation that decide to also receive THC or dose THC, and they tend to their cancer tends to not be able to develop resistance to the to the chemotherapy. So the THC tends to suppress that ability for these aggressive cancers to develop a resistance to being vulnerable to the toxicity of the chemo and radiation. So that's another thing that they found that it does. But no, it's not a magic pill. It's not like, okay, I take this and suddenly boom, cancer's gone, awesome. That's not how it works. We have to be, very, I'd say, cautious, for lack of a better word, in that sense, in not preaching it as if it were some kind of miracle cure that it's just going to cure everything, because no, it's not. Your expectations have to be realistic, but it can make a world of difference. It can make a world of difference. I've had 2 cancers. My first cancer, I did treat it naturally with cannabis extract, and combination with, I did juicing, and I eliminated certain things out of my diet. If you go to the cheat sheet that I made, it's all in there. And I beat that cancer. So 6 years later, after I beat that cancer, I spent too much time, I was spearheading the movement to get cannabis legalized here, and in that process, I was all over the media, and so I had a bunch of people calling me, contacting me, different cancer patients especially, seeking help. So I was making RSO for them, and I was also sitting down with each one, giving them a 1 hour, 2 hour workshop, so to speak, of the things they needed to do, the adjustments they needed to make as far as diet, things that they should eliminate because they promote or produce cancer, things that they should include into their diet because they help against cancer, or they actually fight cancer directly. And so I was getting out of work, then I was seeing 1-2 patients almost every day, and getting home at 10:30, 11 something at night. So I really didn't have much time when it comes to making food. So I was eating junk food. I was eating, going through the drive-through at the fast food or whatever. I just kind of thought myself invincible, and after having beat it naturally, and so I didn't take care of myself. So the result was that 6 years later, I ended up getting a second cancer. Now this cancer, I discovered it when I was in the hospital. So I went to my doctor because I had like some breathing problems, and he said, well, let me check you out. He's noticed that my heart was faster than it should be, so he did an EKG, and he said, you need to go to the hospital. In the hospital, they found out that, turns out that I had a pleural effusion, which is basically that your lungs are getting filled up with fluids. And it was that they later found out, after further studies, that pleural effusion was being caused by a 7 by 7.5 inch mass. It was basically a lymph node that was just packed with cancer, and it was obstructing my lymphatic system, and so the lymphatic fluid is being drained inside my lungs. And so I was at a point where I had like about 25% normal lung capacity. So they had me on oxygen. They had to be they put this large needle through your back to drain out the liquid. And anyways, long story short, in that sense, it was an emergency situation, so I didn't have the luxury of saying, well, I'm gonna do RSO again, even though I even had it available, and I was still using it, but it wasn't gonna solve my issue at the speed I needed it to. And so I went ahead with the chemo. In my case, it was a R-CHOP, it's called. It's a combination of rituximab, which is an antibiotic. It's antibodies that are produced in lab mice, and 3 different chemotherapies, and prednisone. So it's a combination, plus Benadryl, to be able to protect you from getting a reaction from the rituximab. So it was quite a cocktail. And since I had helped a lot of patients, some of them that did chemo, and they told me how great it was, because something else that it does is that by activating these endocannabinoid receptors, these tend to notice inflammation and address it. They tend to notice, all these alerts in your body that you're getting when you're, for instance, if you're arthritic, you have arthritis, then it notices that it's inflammation, and it sends a signal to achieve reactions that are going to bring down that inflammation. So basically, I forgot what I was saying there. Oh yeah, the chemo. Okay, so basically what it does there is it's noticing that this toxicity that you're putting into your body, that it's causing certain situations within your body. So it's alerting, it's activating all these pain signals and whatnot, and so it starts managing those things. Remember, I told you that these receptors are basically managers at a cellular level. Well, it starts managing. So if it's managing your these reactions, then what happens is all of a sudden you start having them less, or you don't have them, or you have them at a much lower level. Basically, for instance, it helps with the vomiting, the nausea, the lack of appetite, helps with the pain, the lack of sleep, all whole gamma of different side effects from the chemo. It helps directly against them. So that's that's one of the things that's key. And a lot of people would tell me, oh, this has helped me. Like, I have no side effects whatsoever since I started using the RSO and whatever. And since I treated my first cancer naturally, I never had that experience, so I didn't really know. And so I decided, well, I'm gonna get the chemotherapy, and I'm not gonna do the RSO for the first round only, just to see how it feels. Well, it was horrible. I didn't last very long, and I received my first round in the hospital, and I was hospitalized for like 2 months because I also ended up getting shingles, and it just spread all over. But after that first round, it was just all night. I was just hallucinating and just talking nonsense, and my body was in extreme pain and just feeling horrible all over. And the next day, I had the nausea. I didn't want to eat. I had the pain. It felt like a gorilla was hugging me, like squeezing me, like that. My body was just in aching pain. And I remember the RSO, and I told my dad, hey, get me in that backpack that I have over there, bring it over, and I got one of the syringes out, just squeezed some in my finger and sucked it off my finger, and good to go. And I can tell you, man, that was like 45 minutes later or so, and all the pain, all the symptoms, all of it was gone, all of it. So it was pretty insane. But yeah, I've had cases in which it hasn't done much for the patient, especially hormone-driven cancers. Why? Because at the time, I didn't know that for hormone-driven cancers, you need to have equal parts CBD to THC. At least. Some cases, you need to have a little more CBD than THC. Remember, your body also has those endocannabinoids, not just the THC. So if, say, you're taking a 50-50, right? So you're taking equal parts THC to CBD, but your body's also producing the cannabinoid that the THC is equal to or similar to, then that's kind of like if you were taking, say, 60% or 70% THC versus the CBD. See, so that's why in some cases these hormone-driven cancers or brain cancers, they require a little more, at least, say 60% CBD to THC or 70% CBD to THC. But yeah, it's so I did have cases in which they were just getting worse from it. It wasn't helping, and those were usually the cases. Later on, I learned about this as studies keep popping up from different researchers, and I continue reading them. I found out that, hey, no, this actually is a thing. We need to include CBD in the picture, in the regimen. And when I started doing that, boom, the difference was like night and day. Especially in brain cancers. I had this one kid that he was in St. Jude, and they were giving him palliative chemotherapy. So it's just basically to help with the seizures from all the crap that he had gone through before I even met his parents. Before I had even met his parents. And once I came into the picture and was providing them with this with the THC, and I found a CBD friend of mine in Arizona that he was producing it from flower, and so I was ordering it from him and getting it. I was sending it over there to St. Jude. The thing was that the doctors came to their room, and he asked the parents, one of the oncologists there, he said, hey, listen, what have you guys been doing? What have you guys been giving him? Because the chemo that he's been receiving is palliative. That means that it's not meant to kill the cancer. It doesn't kill the cancer, period. So what is it that you guys have been doing? And then he said, oh, you know what? Don't tell me. Because I have a feeling that whatever it is, it's probably not legal, and then I'd be forced to, call Child Protective Services. So, but I can tell you that it's working. The results, it's showing that there's no cancer. Like, it's gone. We don't, all the doctors are talking like we're just in awe. We don't know what in the world has been going on, because we're just thinking, he hasn't been receiving any chemo and radiation that kills cancer. So how did this happen? And his cancer was really aggressive. Another case that I had was this lady that she had one breast that was size D, another one size B, her big belly, and she was just thin like skin and bones. The doctor had given her less than 7 days. He said she has less than a week. And I don't know who gave her my number, but she just called out of the blue to meet with me, and so I did. And when she told me her situation, I was kind of concerned because it was illegal still here, and I was in the process of getting it legalized. And so here I am all over the media, and the last thing, and in the Senate and even in the governor's mansion, I had gotten it together with the Secretary of Health here locally, and this was, moving along. And the last thing I needed was somebody to go and, my daughter started using this cannabis extract and died the next day. Well, when she was gonna die the next day regardless. And so that had me, on the fence about providing it or not, but I just told them, hey, listen, you guys are she is very far along. They've literally given her a week. So I wouldn't, this isn't some miracle cure. This is simply a supplement. You're supplementing something that your body uses, and in order for your body to do its thing, to do everything that I already explained. And so, I can provide it for you, and I can make you suppositories. You can use it also and salve, so you can use an ointment. She would use it in her armpits to provide directly to the lymphatic system, and the RSO and the syringes for oral use, because she was barely able to eat. She was basically having liquids and things like that because she had been constipated for like a month and a half, almost 2 months. So just in extreme pain constantly, all the time. And I said, well, it should help you at the very least with the pain, sleep, and that kind of thing. Well, 24 days later, her mom calls me. I thought she'd be dead by then, and that, because sometimes the RSO basically, or the FICO, is to provide quality of life when they're too far along and there's no coming back from it. There's nothing in the world that's going to get it. Well, in her case, they called 24 days later to thank me because she was like, her mom was saying that, the breast that was size D had gone down to a size B, the same as the other one. Her belly had gone down. It looked like she was pregnant, but skin and bones, like she had come out of a concentration camp, but was pregnant. Something like that. That's how it looked. And then with one breast super bigger than the other. And all of a sudden, both breasts were the same. The belly had gone down. She was able to go to the bathroom and she was able to eat. So she actually had gained around 10 pounds. So she lost the belly, lost, that the bigger breast size, and gained weight. And also, so she looked healthier also. And in her armpits, she also had like these big lumps. Those had gone down about 50%. So, and her doctor ended up wanting to meet with me, and then he had me give a chat at the medical school here and things like that. But the thing is that, there's cases and there's cases. For some people, yes. Like in her case, or in the kid's case that I was mentioning earlier, the miracle can happen, so to speak, right? That's exactly what was needed to deal with the cancer. In other cases, there's other things going on in the body that ended up causing the cancer. And maybe the RSO can work against the cancer, but if those other things aren't corrected, then it just keeps on producing more cancer. So you're just kind of, you just have a battle there going on. So it varies. It varies from case to case. It's not something that we can say in absolute, and it's irresponsible for us to say in absolute, yes, RSO, FICO, cannabis is the major cure, that it's, cure all. No, that's not true. It can help, and it does help in most cases. But I would say the best way to go about it is to deal with the cancer from different angles, right? Like supplements, diet, etc., to increase your probability. That way you're handling the different things. If you're on one end, for instance, cooking with frying oils. Frying oils are hydrogenated, so they suppress your body of oxygen. So if they're suppressing your body of oxygen, guess what happens? Your cells say, hey, I need, I'm not getting the oxygenation I need, so let's use fermentation. Remember I mentioned that at the beginning. Let's use fermentation from now on, and then I'll just use this glucose because I can ferment that very easily. See? So, and so you're basically causing your own cancer. So if you keep on doing the things that cause your cancer, no amount of RSO in the world, no amount of cannabinoids is going to cure that cancer. It doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter. No matter what, and no matter what else you use, you're still going to have the same issue. So you have to make changes. With cancer, you need it's a lifestyle change. So learn from my mistakes, right? I ended up with this really aggressive cancer. Why? Because in the past, I stopped taking care of myself. You want to, like, after you beat cancer, a lot of times you want to think like that, I can't get it again, right? That's what we like to think. So, and so we might not take as good care of ourselves as during the cancer when we're fighting for our lives. So, but you need to keep that frame of mind that no, I now have to learn to take care of my body, providing what it needs, keeping out the things that it doesn't and that can actually harm it. Simple. But anyways, I don't know how to say things or explain things or write things in a summed up short manner, but I hope that it cleared up a lot of y'all's questions or concerns or misunderstandings about cannabinoids, cancer, RSO, fecal, etc. If you have any other questions, feel free to write. Bless you all. Bye-bye.